Welcome to Kingsdown School Creative Media, Unit R081, Lesson 2, Client Requirements and the Target Audience. Today we're going to be having a look at the client brief, which is where, normally speaking, the client gives us the information that they think they want to have in whatever it is that you're going to produce for them. It will quite often stipulate what sort of timescales that you are dealing with, and a little bit about how they think that the end product will possibly look. And then, of course, your job is to identify from that things like who are the target audience and what is it that the target audience are going to want from what it is that you produce. And then somewhere along the lines, hopefully you will marry the two up so that you have a finished article that matches the client brief and also has everything that you envisage that your target audience is likely to want in the product that you are producing. And hopefully then you will please both and will be handsomely paid if that's what you're doing as a job. So let's have a look.
So the objective of today's lesson is that you will be able to understand the purposes, properties and effects of the client requirements and the target audience on your brick production planning. Your success criteria is that you will be able to identify and describe the key elements of a client's requirements and target audience, and additionally be able to modify pre-production documents accordingly. So what are the client requirements? Generally speaking, the client requirements are contained within the client brief. The brief is a description of what it is that the client requires you to do or to make or to produce. Sometimes this is very prescriptive and doesn't leave an awful lot of room for creativity because they think they know exactly what it is that they require and they wish you to work in a very particular way to deliver exactly what they have asked for. However, it can also be completely the opposite. It can be just a series of loosely connected ideas with, as I've put here, a slightly nebulous final requirement for a rather vague audience. Now, our job as iMedia professionals would be to tease out those details, to remove any ambiguity that we see within that brief, so that we actually can create a clear and definitive route to what it was that the client's desired outcomes were, whilst obviously ensuring that the product that we create is fit for the purpose it was designed for and suitable for the target audience. So those things are not mutually exclusive. They go hand in glove. You cannot do one without the other. So when you are given a brief, you should break it down. You need to break it down into keywords, the requirements, the desired outputs, possibly highlight or underlining those keywords to make sure you have it clear in your mind what the essentials are, what the desirables are, and what the nice to haves are, because that's probably the easiest way of breaking it down. The requirements will always be attributed, if you like, to a workflow, and therefore you have to make sure you know exactly what it is that you require, what you can do within the workflow, what you can do in the time allowed. And then obviously if you find that you have something or a time restriction, you're not going to have enough time, then obviously the nice to haves are the type of things that will become a casualty. And that's just the reality of business life. So here is an example of a client requirements, and we have annotated it. As you'll see at the bottom, it says that keywords are in blue and outputs, so those are the things that you're going to have, are in green. So here we go. Our client is an independent filmmaker and they're called Scribbled Edits Productions. So somewhere along the line that name is going to have to be in that. They're commissioning us to create a trailer. Now, most of you know what a trailer is, of course, so it's effectively a short, about 2.5, 3 minute summing up of what is actually in that movie. It will, of course, have the port forward. There is the title, so that's going to have to be in the trailer. They've got a main character called a teenager called Jazz. So obviously they've got to be in there. It's something to do with a smartphone bought from an auction site. And then he notices that there are a few apps on there which he wasn't really expecting to find. Delete some of the contacts in the phone's memory, etc. So this is a second-hand phone. It's had some stuff on it. He removes it, and then he starts getting problems. As you can see, more keywords here. Mysterious BLZ 606. Okay, will need to be in there. The fact that it's a 12 certificate, the genre of the trailer, when the film is to be released, who it's written and directed by, and it says that that trailer must combine images and sound and should persuade the viewers to go and see the film. It should be of a suitable length for a film trailer, so as I said, about 2.5, 3 minutes, and must include the film's title, certificate, and release date. The final trailer must be saved in a suitable format to be viewed on a portable device such as a smartphone. So this one's fairly prescriptive, but it doesn't give you the whole story. It still leaves us quite a number of things for us to get our teeth into, so to speak. So let's see if we can now break that down. Here's a little activity for you to do. Another brief there. Answer the questions at the bottom. From this brief, identify 2 time restrictions that are placed on this production that's coming up. Okay, and also identify 1 design requirement. Design requirement is one of those must-haves. So that should only take you about 5 minutes. So I'll let you do that now. So hopefully you have managed to spot those 2 time impediments and give me one of the must-haves. Now, when I gave you the example of the trailer, I said that it hadn't actually given me everything. And the reason why it hasn't given me everything is because it didn't really tell me much about what the audience would be expecting. Now, everything in the sphere of iMedia will be created for an audience. Remember, it's not created for the client, it is created for an audience, but it is the client that tells us what they actually want to be giving to the client, to the audience. But therefore, it's vitally important to understand both how the audiences are categorized and the effect that the audience may have on our planning. So, as humans, we automatically characterize and categorize people in very different ways, from age to size 0 and just about any other collective we can think of. That may be by their religious beliefs, etc. So when we're considering which category an audience may fall into, generally we have a slightly fewer number of choices than we do in actual life. However, there are some obvious ones, as I said, such as age, gender, religion, ethnicity, and political persuasion, which can always be used as markers. But in our pre-production, we need to be able to identify who the audience is, who the audience could be, who the audience should be, and with that knowledge be able to influence the designs, preparation, final products so that they are always suitable for the audience they were created for. And underpinning all of that, we also need to consider what it is that the target audience will require from that which we are producing. So in the trailer example that we used earlier, the client said what should be included, but actually left us to decide what exactly the audience might like to see in the trailer. Now, this is something that should be focused on, especially when you are creating products in your other units. Okay, so yes, you need to know who the audience is supposed to be. Yes, you need to know what sort of category those audience members are going to fall into, but you really do need to understand what it is then that that audience will expect. In the trailer example, obviously, they're going to expect you to show pretty much some of the best bits of the film. It's not going to give away, all of it. It's not going to say exactly what's happened, but it's certainly going to leave you on a cliff edge. It's going to make you want to go and see what it is that transpires. You know, how has this happened? Why has it happened? What's the outcome? So when you're picking the bits of the film that you're going to use to actually illustrate this, that's what you're considering, what it is that the audience actually wishes to see. Okay, so let's just have another quick look at these audience categories. Gender, age, ethnicity, income, location, accessibility. There will be others. And some of these break down a little bit. I'll take, gender's an obvious one. It's no longer binary. So we need to be aware of that nowadays. Age is another one. If you think about age, we categorize age quite often using the school years. We do that almost automatically. So you've kind of got like toddlers, preschoolers, you know, then you'll have something like nursery age, perhaps then primary school. Then you might come up with pre-teens, then you'll have secondary school, then somebody will break that down to teenagers, which takes you up obviously all the way to 18. Then we have young adults, obviously adults, and then middle-aged, and then obviously into old age. So that gives you some idea of how these categories work. It's not just one thing, it will be many things. And the reason why we really need to be aware of this is because sometimes what we're producing won't be black and white, and it won't also be just for one type. It may encompass a number of different categories and a number of different areas. And by that I mean those categories that we've listed there will still be different in a different country because their ages for what they're allowed to do and when they're allowed to do it may change. How they live their lives. We've got down here income. Well, the income, obviously, for the average family in the United Kingdom is very different to that of the average income of a family, say, in India. So we do need to take account of these things. When I said earlier about religious beliefs, obviously there are some things which are unacceptable or less acceptable in some religions than with others, and therefore you must make sure when you're creating some iMedia things that you don't fall foul of that. If this is something that could be viewed by everybody, then you need to make sure that you are being very neutral about what it is that you are producing so that you don't offend anyone. Okay, so another little activity for you now. So identify two categories of target audience other than age that need to be considered when designing 4 characters for the Kids 5-a-Day campaign. For each category, explain one reason why it should be considered. Okay, so it's why this category should be considered. And to give you a little bit of background, the Kids 5-a-Day campaign, basically you've got the situation where they are using food types for the 5-a-Day campaign, and I think we all know what the 5-a-Day campaign is. That's about getting youngsters to eat more fruit and vegetable, and obviously they want characters. So what are the categories that are going to come into play for this kind of activity that we're going to undertake? And then once you've done that, in your books, list as many other different categories of audiences you can think of using ones that I've already given you and ones that come to your mind, and then break all of those down as I did with the age thing, break them down as necessary. Okay, so this should take you probably I would think somewhere in the region of about 15 minutes to do this particular activity. So as normal, if you'd like to stop the video, that's absolutely great. You can do that now. And for those who are going to do it later, I will carry on with the next bit. So there will, as ever, be a homework for this particular section. The client briefs will be explored again, as well as items on the target audience, and each of those things that we've been looking at will come into play. So you really do need to make sure you understand, once again, exactly what it is that you're trying to get. So in the case of the client brief, you're trying to understand exactly what it is in the way of must-haves, desirables, and nice-to-haves within whatever it is that you're creating. Whereas the target audience will be who the client is aiming their product at. And obviously your considerations there is not just age groups and the categories, etc., that we've discussed, but also what that target audience is going to expect from that product that you are actually preparing. And that's where your planning is affected. Okay, so I'd like you to answer these review questions and email them back to me. What do we need to be sure of before we can make sure we create what the client needs? So what do we need to be certain of before we can make sure we create what the client needs? Why is the audience requirements of such great concern? So why is it that the requirements of the audience, as I've just described them, are of such great concern? What type of things would you expect the client brief to contain? Well, based on that example that you saw earlier, it gives you quite a lot to work with. So if you just go back and categorize those things that were in the example, I'm sure you can do that one. How do we decide who the audience is? Have another look at the categories and then identify 5 categories that we could use to identify an audience. Okay, so that concludes this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed the activities, and we will see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.